Happy midwinter, everybody! Mugsy here, formally inviting you to come celebrate with me the amazing history of the seer of seer, sage of sages, prognosticator of prognosticator, and weather prophet extraordinaire, the humble groundhog. This is the first in a series where I do a deep dive into the holidays, exploring their surprising origins, which are often rooted in the cycles of nature. And along the way, I'm going to show you some nature crafts to celebrate. So if you're into folklore and mythology and you like making the most out of every moment, please be sure to like and subscribe and let me know in the comments what holidays you're interested in learning about and what crafts you might want to try. Now on to Groundhog's Day. Most people know about this holiday from the 1993 Bill Murray movie of the same name, where cynical weatherman Phil Connors reports live from Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania at the annual Groundhog's Day celebration. After falsely reporting good weather to come, a snowstorm traps Phil in the folksy town, and he is forced to relive Groundhog's Day over and over again in an epic time loop until he gets it right, confronting his shadow, if you will. This movie brought a lot of public awareness to Groundhog's Day, and some people didn't even realize it was an actual holiday, because it seems pretty strange. But it's true. There is a holiday that celebrates the weather predictions of the groundhog, and other than Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, it's celebrated in Canada, in Russia, and in other parts of the United States. Every year in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, the inner circle of the groundhog interprets Punxsutawney's Phil's weather predictions based on whether or not he saw his shadow, and therefore we are due for 6 more weeks of winter. And they've been carrying on this tradition for 134 years. And it's the same groundhog too. And he owes his good health and longevity to Groundhog Punch. So to kick off our history of Groundhog's Day, we're going to share with you our recipe for this life-preserving elixir.
The Groundhog Punch is some combination of orange juice, eggs, vodka, and milk. I guess all part of a balanced breakfast. But I spent some time looking at different drinks that had these ingredients, and I settled on what I think is a pretty good interpretation of Groundhog's Punch. Instead of using milk, because I think egg whites and milk in a drink with citrus and other sour type things sounds absolutely disgusting to me. So instead I subbed out for some seltzer water, and we decided to include some vanilla extract, or today actually we'll just be shaking it with some vanilla bean broken up in the shaker, just to give it like a little touch of that round milkiness. But you'll see with the egg whites, you don't need the milk. But if you wanted it to be more authentic, go ahead and skip the seltzer water and top it off with some milk. You filthy animal. Okay, so to get started, we are going to extract an egg white. Crack, break in half, being careful to keep the yolk inside of one of the shells, and then you pass it back and forth. Then we're gonna go ahead and use some vanilla bean, as I said, because I don't have extract. We're just gonna break that up. 1.5 ounces of orange juice. 1.5 ounces of vodka. We're just using the cheapo vodka. I mean, there's no point in buying nice vodka for mixed drinks. It's a pro tip from me to you. Now we'll add our ice. Okay. Now the fun part. Once we're all shaken, pour her up. Just top her off for a little bit of effervescence. And there we have it, our own version of the Groundhog Punch. Cheers.
Thank you, Cece. Woo!
To understand the history, we have to go back to the first Groundhog's Day, which took place in Punxsutawney in 1887, with climber Frias, an editor for the local newspaper The Punxsutawney Spirit, reporting that on February 2nd, today is Groundhog's Day, and up to the time of going to the press, the beast has not yet seen its shadow. In this point in time, the groundhog, aka the woodchuck or the whistle pig, so named for the sound that it makes, was very important to the late 18th century Pennsylvania pioneers, who would use its fur to clothe them and keep them warm in the winter, and its meat was considered both a delicacy and a staple. A wooded place in town called Gobbler's Knob was known for its large groundhog hunts, where men, including climber Freyas, would rouse the sleeping groundhogs from their dens and chase them through the woods. The early days of the Groundhog's Day celebrations began with these hunts, and instead of being armed with guns, they were armed with rubber hoses and shovels to listen to the ground and suss out where the groundhogs were. They initiated their Groundhog's Day ceremony with a song. I don't know exactly how they sang it, but you know, sea shanties are a thing right now, so I'm just gonna give this a shot. We had a pile made of rye and groundhog was the meat. We have enough and plenty too, and more than we can eat. When the first groundhog popped his head out of the den, they would spot him and shout, "The official woodchuck is holed!" Then the men would dig him out of his burrow and force him to drink some of this delicious, life-elongating punch before divining his weather predictions. After the punch, celebrants would have a great banquet of groundhog meat, and although they let that first groundhog go, up to 100 groundhogs could be eaten at a single Groundhog's Day celebration. Wah wah. Part of why Groundhog's Day became such a celebrated holiday was because of an effort to play up the local quirky tradition. The town of Punxsutawney was nearby a coal mine and benefited from a train that ran through carrying the coal byproducts to Pittsburgh. Wanting to become a site of tourism, a go-to location as opposed to just a place to pass through, climber Freyas, the father of Groundhog's Day, and the Punxsutawney Spirit newspaper played up their local tradition until they became more and more elaborate every year and more people started coming, until the tradition looks like what it does today. But the February 2nd weather divination was not just a tourism trap. It was a tradition that was brought over from Europe by the Pennsylvania pioneers. The residents of this town were immigrants from Germany who came in the early 1800s to work in the coal mines and the factory. They were called the Pennsylvania Dutch, but Dutch as in Deutsch as in German. Weather divination using the behavior of animals exists across cultures, and it makes sense that they would do this now on February 2nd because this is the halfway point between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. During this time, people will often look to the behavior of hibernating animals to predict the advent of better weather. When animals hibernate, they enter into a sort of torpor, their bodily functions significantly slowing down, living off of body fat and entering into sort of a deep sleep. Sometimes the animals will wake up early or they will take a break from their hibernation, and this was seen as a sign to the early weather diviners. In Germany, this time of year was associated with the Christian holiday of Candlemas, and the weather meteorologist, instead of being a groundhog, was a badger or a hedgehog. There was an old German saying, if the badger sunbathes during Candlemas week, for 4 more months he will be in his hole. Since there were neither badgers nor hedgehogs in North America, when the German immigrants came, they chose the groundhog. Oddly, the tradition continues to be if the weather is nice on February 2nd, the hibernating animals will see their shadow, return to their holes, and there's more bad weather to come. Traditionally, Candlemas was a time when people would bring their candles to church to be blessed. Which brings me to my next way to celebrate the season, candle making. So for this activity, you're gonna need a wick, a sheet of candle wax, a blow dryer to help melt the wax, and a scissor for cutting the wick. So this is one of the easiest ways to make candles, and particularly appropriate because we're using sheets of beeswax, which is what candles were made of back in the day. So you're gonna wanna melt the wax a little bit using the hairdryer, and very simply, wrap the wax around the wick. Make an effort to make it as tight and even as possible. And to be mindful of the size you want to use, you can use your candlestick as a guide. Simply cut off the excess. Use a little heat to seal. Trim your wick, and you've got yourself a candle. There's many ways to make a candle, but I like this method because it's super simple. Happy Candlemas, everybody! Candlemas is a holiday that is also known as the Feast of the Presentation of Jesus Christ, and the Feast of the Purification of the Virgin Mary, which takes place 40 days after Christmas and honors how Jesus and Mary followed traditional Mosaic law and went to the temple for a traditional purification ceremony. The candles of Candlemas were seen as a reminder of God's love and as a sign of Jesus as a light onto the world. They were also seen as an acknowledgement of the growing light of the sun. This was a day of purification, of fire, and weather divination. It was customary to take down Christmas decorations at this time. It was also traditional to keep an eye out for the flowers that were known as Candlemas bells. Today, we more frequently know them as snowdrops, also known as galanthus. Now, these are tiny, beautiful white flowers that will bloom as early as late January, early February. Some folklore told that these flowers were given as a gift from God to Eve, who was in despair over the death and the cold that had entered the world, as a sign of hope and his everlasting love. I think all these different ways of celebrating midwinter are so beautiful. How people would celebrate the hope of the coming spring. And like many Christian holidays, Candlemas does have its roots in older traditions. Though this was one of the earliest feasts of the church, with its celebration going back as early as 4th century AD, many scholars have shown the connection between Candlemas and older pagan holidays. In the late 1600s, Pope Innocent XII stated,
"Why do we, in this feast, carry candles? Because the Gentiles dedicated the month of February to their gods, and as at the beginning of it Pluto stole Proserpine, and her mother Ceres sought her in the night with lighted candles, so they, at the beginning of the month, walked about the city with lighted candles. Because the Holy Fathers could not extirpate the custom, they ordained that Christians should carry about candles in honor of the Blessed Virgin, and thus what was done before in honor of Ceres is now done in honor of the Blessed Virgin."
Here the Pope is referring to the ancient Roman practice which honored the story of the abduction of the goddess of spring by the underworld god and the search by her mother, the goddess of agriculture, and their partial success, with spring and fertility returning to the earth for 8 months of the year. There's of course the Greek equivalent in the story of Persephone, Hades, and Demeter. This ancient myth speaks to the changing of the seasons, where the goddess of spring lives underground with Hades for 4 months of the year, fulfilling her eternal deal. During this time in ancient Rome, weather divinations were also done with hibernating animals, but they were held at night. The animals in question were the fox, the bear, and again, the hedgehog. It was believed that if anyone saw one of these animals on the night of February 2nd, and they saw their shadow in the bright light of the moon, that they would return to their burrows and would thus signal more winter to come. Again, this is a reiteration of the weather divination theme that if the weather is nice in the beginning of February, that the animals will see their shadow and be afraid, thus signaling more winter to come. It's interestingly counterintuitive, I think, that nice weather in midwinter should signal that we have cold weather to come. It makes sense to me that animals returning to their burrow should obviously signify that perhaps they've got some weather knowledge that we don't have, but the idea that good weather is a bad sign, I can't help but think as an adorable sign of human optimism and irony. But hey, that's just my take on it. We'll again see this weather divination concept in the stories and holidays of the ancient Celts. I want to apologize in advance for any mispronunciation of Celtic terms. I am trying my best here. The ancient early February holiday celebrated by the Celts, which also influenced Groundhog Day, was called Imbolc, or in the belly, aka Brigid's Day. This is a holiday to honor Brigid, or Brigid, the goddess of fertility, fire, prophecy, poetry, and craft making. This was when people would historically welcome the signs of spring to come, the lengthening of the days, the early stirrings of the spring crops, and the coming lactation of livestock. To see a hedgehog, which was one of Brigid's animals, on February 1st was considered a good sign, especially if he chooses to stay outside his burrow. One of Brigid's folktales sheds light on some of these weather divination traditions. It tells of her relationship with the winter weather hag, the Cailleach, who she had an antagonistic relationship with. In one of these folk tales, midwinter was considered the time where the Cailleach would go out and collect wood if there was going to be bad weather to come. So on this midwinter day, she would make it bright and sunny so she could find the best wood. Therefore, if there was bad weather on midwinter, that was a sign that the Cailleach didn't need more wood, and therefore spring was on its way. In some of these folk tales, the old winter hag would hold Brigid hostage, accounting for false springs and difficult late winter weather. To honor and welcome Brigid on this holiday, people would light small and big bonfires outside their homes. Effigies of Brigid were also crafted. Corn dollies made from husks, rushes, and reeds that were carried from home to home and hung outside of people's doors to secure her blessings for the season to come. After the Christianization of Ireland, the goddess Brigid became Saint Brigid, and her holiday occurred at the same time, on her birthday. One of 3 patron saints of Ireland, there is some debate over whether Brigid really was a historical person, but histories of her do begin to appear in the 8th century. Saint Brigid was told to be a woman of great agricultural knowledge who created a monastery in Kildare on the site of a former shrine to the goddess. Much like her namesake, she is a saint of fire and milk and was celebrated for her charity to the poor and her healing powers. Saint Brigid is also associated with the ubiquitous Celtic symbol of the Brigid's cross. It is told that these woven reeds, which are hung over doors, were first braided by Saint Brigid. However, it has been widely noted by historians that these crosses predate the Christianization of Ireland, and they were hung over doors to protect the home from evil, hunger, and fire. Which of course leads me to my last craft, the Brigid's cross. For this activity, I decided to go with these biodegradable wheat straws as an alternative to the reeds and rushes that the Brigid's cross are traditionally made out of, because I don't want to disrupt the fragile New York City wetlands by harvesting their reeds and rushes. So I've gone for this as an alternative, and it's also going to save me some time because I'm not going to have to soak these overnight or for hours on end. Just a little bit of water in a bowl is going to help get them pliable enough to weave with. The other materials that I'm using are rubber bands, which are going to be used to secure the ends before I tie them with this hemp string. And then of course I also have scissors for cutting. So you're going to use 16 pieces of the straw and soak them. Massage the middle so that it's able to be bent and to prevent cracking. Fold it over
One of the pieces which will remain straight.
and just go over the one that you just did.
Continue in this fashion, bending a straw and placing it over each one of the arms in a circle. Over time, you will see a square forming in the center.
Tighten up your square a little bit, try to even it out as much as possible, and secure with your rubber bands. And this is just temporary until you go back in and tie with your string of your choice. Some people like to use white string, that's traditionally done as well, or different colors. Just trim the ends. What a story! From Pennsylvania to Germany, Rome, and Ireland, we find a history rich in the anticipation of spring. Across cultures, people will look to the behavior of hibernating animals to divine the weather to come. People would turn to the beautiful snowdrops as a sign of hope and would light little and big fires in honor of the growing sun. While popular culture may have forgotten the ways that we used to celebrate the turning of the seasons, we see them recreated in our modern cultural myths. And many people still celebrate the ancient holidays and often give them their own little twist. The point, I believe, is to shake away the midwinter blues and to appreciate all the subtle signs of spring. So make sure you've taken down your Christmas decorations as we now turn to the hope of spring. Take the time to notice the subtle changes and the stirring of the earth, from the rainbow rebirth of the flowers to the lengthening of the light of day. And enjoy the coziness of these last days of winter. Light a candle, have a drink. Now's a great time to start picking out your seeds for the growing season. We've gone through the worst of it and there are brighter days ahead. Cheers and a blessed midwinter.